The Caliph Who Ate Gold. Baghdad's Last Day. February 1258. A man stands in his own treasury. Gold everywhere, mountains of it, 50 years of wealth, silk that could clothe armies, jewels that could ransom kingdoms. But he's not alone. Mongol guards flank him. Not his guards, theirs. They're watching his face, waiting to see if he understands yet. Behind him, his city is burning. Ahead of him, something worse than fire. This is Caliph al-Mustasim, ruler of Baghdad, commander of the faithful, spiritual heir to Muhammad himself. In 3 hours, he'll be dead. But not by blade, not by arrow, not by any method you'd expect. Because what's about to happen isn't just execution. It's a message written in blood that will echo for 500 years. They won't need to repeat it. They'll only need to do it once. And every king from Damascus to Delhi will know exactly what defiance costs. For 500 years, Baghdad wasn't just a city. It was the city, the axis of the world. This was where Greek philosophy met Persian astronomy, where Indian mathematics merged with Islamic law, where the world's knowledge concentrated into libraries so vast you'd need 3 lifetimes just to read the catalogues. The House of Wisdom alone held texts on everything: medicine, mechanics, philosophy, mathematics. Al-Khwarizmi invented algebra here, right here in Baghdad. Al-Razi wrote medical encyclopedias that Europe wouldn't translate for 400 years. Scholars traveled from Spain to Samarkand just to study in Baghdad's academies. 1 million people lived here, more than any European city. Underground canals channeled water through the entire city. Markets traded goods from China to Cordoba. Hospitals treated patients regardless of faith or wealth. This wasn't Rome fading into memory. This was a civilization at its absolute peak, and ruling over all of it, the Caliph. Not just a king, not just a political figure. The Caliph was the successor to Muhammad, the spiritual authority over millions of Muslims, a man whose legitimacy stretched back through 37 generations. Al-Mustasim inherited that title in 1242. He also inherited something else, a government that had been decaying for 2 centuries. The Abbasid Caliphate still spoke with religious authority, sure, but its armies, mostly mercenaries, its governors, semi-independent warlords, its treasury, filled but never spent on defense. Because Baghdad had survived internal weakness before. It had endured civil wars. It had outlasted rival caliphs. It had watched empires rise and collapse around it while its scholars kept writing and its markets kept trading. So when distant reports arrived about horsemen in the east, horsemen who had already erased the Khwarezmian Empire, horsemen who had depopulated entire cities in Persia, horsemen who didn't stop at rivers or mountains or negotiated borders, Baghdad took note and did nothing. The Mongols weren't an army. They were a mechanism, a system refined over 50 years of constant warfare. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, he left behind something unprecedented. Not just territory, not just conquered peoples. He left behind a military doctrine that turned warfare into replicable process, and one of Genghis's grandsons, Hulagu Khan, was tasked with carrying it west. In 1253, the Mongol Kurultai assigned Hulagu a specific objective: secure submission from every state between Mongolia and the Mediterranean. Not just military defeat, submission. Because the Mongol Empire wasn't built on occupation. It was built on compliance. Cities that submitted early retained their autonomy. Their leaders stayed in power. Their people continued their lives. They just paid tribute and acknowledged Mongol supremacy. Cities that resisted stopped existing. Every target received the same sequence. Mongol messengers arrive. They present terms in writing. Submit immediately. Send tribute. Provide hostages, usually sons of rulers. Accept Mongol governance. Compliance means survival. Your walls stay standing. Your markets stay open. Your population lives. Refusal triggers nothing immediate. No threats, no ultimatums. Just silence. Weeks pass. Sometimes months. The city continues its routine. Defenders begin to think maybe the Mongols were bluffing. Maybe they moved on to easier targets. And then the horizon fills with horsemen. Not in chaos. Not in scattered groups. In formation. Cavalry units move in coordinated patterns. Siege engines arrive on wagons. The army doesn't attack. It surrounds, completely, every gate, every road, every escape route. Then construction begins. In full view of the defenders, the Mongols assemble siege equipment. Trebuchets designed to throw stones weighing 300 pounds. Engineers from China and Persia work alongside Mongol soldiers. The defenders watch machines being built specifically to dismantle their walls. A second embassy arrives. The terms are repeated, word for word, exactly as before. This is the last chance. Most cities surrender.
August 12th, 30 B.C., Alexandria. A queen sits alone in her palace chamber, dressed in gold and royal purple. Two attendants stand beside her, one holding a basket of figs. In 10 minutes, all three will be dead. But this is not the story of how Cleopatra died. This is the story of the 10 days before, when the man who would become Rome's first emperor dismantled her empire without violence, without chains, and without an army. No blade, no execution, just isolation, manipulation, and one unspoken threat. The weapon that finally broke Cleopatra wasn't Rome itself. It was her son. And the most disturbing part isn't what happened in that chamber, but how methodically Octavian ensured she had no other choice. August 1st, 30 B.C. Alexandria's harbor was burning. Just a year earlier, Cleopatra and Mark Antony had assembled the largest naval force the Mediterranean had ever seen. Over 500 warships and legions from a dozen kingdoms, everything riding on one decisive battle. They lost it at Actium, not in hours, but in minutes. Roman ships rammed theirs, fires spread across decks, commanders abandoned formation, and Antony's flagship chased Cleopatra's retreat, while his navy died behind him. Overnight, the alliance collapsed. Kings withdrew their troops. Senators pledged loyalty to Octavian. Gold meant for soldiers vanished into private vaults. By the time Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt, their army existed only on paper. A year later, Octavian's legions stood outside Alexandria. Inside the city, betrayal accelerated. Antony's cavalry defected first, riding out in full formation and switching sides without a single casualty. Then his infantry followed. Then his remaining ships, which sailed out of the harbor and surrendered before a battle even began. The palace emptied. Officials fled. Servants vanished. Guards abandoned their posts. Antony walked through silent corridors, shouting orders to soldiers who no longer existed. Cleopatra did not panic. She calculated. She retreated into her mausoleum, a massive stone structure she had built years earlier, part tomb, part fortress. It had one entrance, walls 3 feet thick, and no windows. Inside, she gathered Egypt's accumulated wealth: gold, jewels, incense, ebony, centuries of Ptolemaic treasure, and sealed the doors from the inside. Ancient sources disagree about her intention. Some say she planned to burn everything, denying Octavian both wealth and spectacle. Others believe she intended to negotiate from a position of strength. What she did next changed everything. She sent a message to Antony claiming Cleopatra was dead. Antony believed it immediately. Already unraveling, he ordered his slave Eros to kill him. Eros refused and took his own life instead. Antony drove a sword into his stomach. The wound was slow, but fatal. As he bled on the floor, the truth arrived. Cleopatra was alive inside the mausoleum. Plutarch describes what followed with almost surgical precision. Antony's body was carried to the sealed tomb. Cleopatra refused to open the doors, not from cruelty, but from calculation. Opening them meant losing her only fortification. Instead, ropes were lowered from a window, and Antony's dying body was hauled up the stone wall. Cleopatra and her attendants pulled him inside themselves, dragging a Roman general while he bled. he died in her arms. When his body stopped moving, Cleopatra was completely alone. No army, no allies, no kingdom. Octavian was already inside Alexandria. Octavian did not want Cleopatra dead. Dead queens do not parade. For years, he had fought Romans against Romans in brutal civil wars. Publicly, he needed a living Cleopatra as a symbol. A queen in chains would allow him to rewrite history, presenting Rome as defending itself against a foreign threat. But Cleopatra was dangerous. She had survived Julius Caesar's assassination. She had rebuilt her power repeatedly. She spoke multiple languages, negotiated with kings, commanded fleets. If given time, she could have destroyed herself and everything she controlled, denying Octavian both treasure and spectacle. He moved with precision. He did not storm the mausoleum. He sent Gaius Proculeius, a man Antony had once trusted, to speak at the sealed entrance. Proculeius offered vague assurances of safety and negotiation. While Cleopatra was distracted, Roman soldiers climbed the walls and entered through the same window Antony had been pulled through. Cleopatra realized what was happening, moments too late. Ancient sources disagree. Some say she reached for a dagger. Others suggest poison. But it did not matter. She was stopped. Not beaten, not chained, not harmed. Simply transferred from mausoleum to palace, from queen to prisoner. Her captivity was elegant, almost deceptive. She remained in luxurious chambers. Her servants stayed, her belongings untouched. But every door was watched, every meal inspected, every object examined. A guard outside had one order: she must not die. This was not mercy. It was logistics. Octavian needed her alive, intact, and compliant for his triumph. 3 days later, Octavian visited. No guards. A deliberate gesture. He spoke politely, offered no threats, no promises. He hinted at her children's futures, suggested cooperation might influence their fate. Cleopatra tried to negotiate. She gave inventories, offered plans for smooth transitions, assured stability. Octavian listened, took notes, thanked her, and left. Over the next days, the pattern repeated. Cleopatra believed she was bargaining. She was not. Octavian was cataloging. Every detail she provided became a tool to seize wealth and neutralize supporters. Isolation deepened. The only voice she heard was his. Then Cleopatra stopped eating. No demands, no statements, just refusal. Within days, she weakened, developed a fever. Guards reported it immediately. Octavian acted carefully. He did not threaten, force-feed, or punish. He simply clarified one fact. Her children were in his custody, and if she harmed herself, they would suffer consequences. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. She resumed eating the same day. The trap was complete. Cleopatra had 4 children. 3 were politically manageable. 1 was not, Caesarion, the biological son of Julius Caesar. As long as he lived, Octavian's legitimacy remained vulnerable. Cleopatra had already sent him east, far from Rome. Everything she did afterward, negotiations, cooperation, was theater, buying time. Then the message came. Caesarion had returned, convinced by his tutor that Octavian intended to make him king. Cleopatra understood instantly. There would be no mercy. She stopped negotiating, stopped offering information. According to Plutarch, she requested only one thing: permission to visit Antony's tomb. Octavian allowed it. On August 12th, Cleopatra bathed and dressed in full royal regalia. She visited Antony's tomb, performed the proper rituals, returned to her palace, ordered figs, wrote a letter, dismissed all servants except her 2 closest attendants, and sealed herself inside her chamber. When Octavian's guards finally broke in, they found 3 bodies. Cleopatra lay on a golden couch, dressed as a queen. One attendant lay dead. The other, barely alive, straightened Cleopatra's crown with her last breath. A Roman guard asked, "Was this well done?" She answered, "It was fitting for a queen descended from kings." And then she died. The exact method of death remains uncertain. Poison hidden in figs, a hairpin, or jewelry. But Cleopatra was 39 years old. She had ruled Egypt for 21 years. Octavian conquered everything she built, but she denied him the one thing he wanted most, her alive and broken in his triumph. He honored her request, buried her beside Antony with full ceremonial rites, and finished his work. Caesarion was quietly executed. Cleopatra's other children were taken to Rome under Octavian's control. Egypt became his personal province. Within 3 years, Octavian became Augustus, Rome's first emperor. Cleopatra's death was not romance. It was not weakness. It was the last move in a game where every other option had been systematically removed. Octavian conquered Egypt, but he never broke her. And the most disturbing part of her final 10 days isn't what happened in that chamber. It's how carefully he made sure she had no other choice.
In 1584, a woman was sentenced to burn alive, not because she killed, not because she rebelled, not because she confessed. She died because her eyes did not open wide enough, because her tears did not fall fast enough, because her body failed a test no human body could ever pass. Imagine standing in a courtroom where your words mean nothing, and your pulse, your breathing, your blinking, your pupils become the real evidence. This is not a story about religion. This is a story about power. And the woman, whose body became a crime scene, Toledo, Spain. A small stone room, a wooden table, one candle trembling in silence. A notary dips his quill into black ink. He is not writing a confession. He is not writing a sentence. He writes measurements. Subject's pupils, 4 millimeters at rest, 6 millimeters when presented with host, insufficient dilation, flag for secondary observation. Across the room, a woman kneels. She believes she is praying. She does not know she is being measured. The men in the room are not watching her soul. They are watching her eyes. Her name is Isabel Deorda. She is 33 years old. And in 18 months, these few words will be used to justify setting her on fire. By this time, nothing about this process is new. For over a century, the Spanish Inquisition has been studying human bodies, not to heal them, to read them, pulse rate, tear production, breathing patterns, muscle tension, blink frequency. They believe something terrifying, that the body cannot lie, that the body reveals what the mind tries to hide. If that is true, confession becomes unnecessary. All they need is observation. Between 1480 and 1530, about 2,000 people are executed, but more than 40,000 are interrogated. Most are not killed. They are watched, measured, catalogued, ledgers fill with notes. Subject sweated when asked about Sabbath. Subject showed no tears during prayer. Subject's hands dry when touching crucifix. This is not theology. This is data collection. By the mid-16th century, most of those dragged before tribunals are women. Not because women commit more crimes, but because authorities believe women's bodies reveal truth more easily. Women are considered weaker vessels, more emotional, more reactive, which means better instruments. Women become living lie detectors, human experiments disguised as souls in need of saving. In September of 1589, 2 polite men knock at Isabel's door. They show a sealed document. No accusations, no explanation. She is brought to a quiet chamber with sunlight, chairs, and a crucifix. No chains, no screaming. The Inquisition understands something important. A terrified person will say anything. A calm person reveals patterns. Isabel is seated. Hours pass, no questions. 2 notaries sit behind a wooden screen, writing constantly. She shifts in her chair. They write. She rubs her hands. They write. Her breathing changes when footsteps pass the door. They write. She has not spoken a single word, yet pages are already filled. Isabel does not know that she has already failed several biological expectations. The foundation of this system comes from a book written decades earlier that claims evil alters the body itself. Inquisitors, extend this idea into a theory that true Christian belief physically transforms the nervous system. True believers cry more easily. They tremble near holy objects. They feel overwhelming emotion in prayer. False believers do not. Therefore, belief can be measured. Physicians are hired by tribunals not to heal but to measure. Calipers for pupils, water clocks for pulse, mirrors for breath. Experiments quietly prove these methods do not work. Records show no meaningful difference between true Christians and converts. The margin notes admit it, yet the experiments continue. Because the goal is no longer truth, the goal is control. An inquisitor named Alonso de Mendoza eventually enters Isabel's room. He does not sit across from her, he sits beside her. He asks strange questions about her wedding night, about childbirth, about pleasure, about pain. Isabel is confused. Mendoza opens a small wooden case containing a mirror, a glass vial, and a thin brass rod. He asks which saint she prayed to during labor. He watches her neck. A notary times her pulse. Mendoza lifts the mirror inches from her face and tells her to stare at the crucifix. Later, the ledger will say her pupils failed to dilate as expected. Expected by whom is never explained. Isabel knows what this means. Families like hers have been training daughters for decades. Cry in church, shake when kissing the cross, practice tears, practice devotion. Isabel has been practicing since childhood. Still, her body betrays her. After nearly a day, Isabel is placed in a small cell with another woman named Maria Enriquez. Maria appears kind and frightened. She shares food, she listens, she comforts. Maria is an informant. The Inquisition plants prisoners whose sole job is to gather confession through friendship. Isabel talks. She mentions lighting candles on Friday for cleaning. She mentions songs her grandmother sang. Days later, she is confronted with written transcripts of these conversations, altered and expanded. Paper now outweighs memory. At night, Maria prays loudly. Tears stream. Hands shake. Her performance is theatrical. It is a demonstration. This is what true devotion is supposed to look like. Isabel tries to copy her. She prays, she cries, she trembles. The notary writes that Isabel's tears stop too suddenly, that her shaking lacks rhythm, that her devotion appears mechanical. Isabel is not being judged on faith. She is being graded on acting. On the seventh day, Isabel confesses. She admits to lighting candles on Fridays, avoiding pork, keeping old prayers. She sobs. She believes confession means survival. But after she is led away, Mendoza writes that her confession lacks physiological authenticity, meaning she did not repent correctly. Manuals state that true repentance produces uncontrollable sobbing, difficulty breathing, and near fainting. Isabel cried. Not enough, trembled, wrong way, did not collapse. Therefore, she is still secretly Jewish. Therefore, she is still guilty. Too little emotion means guilt. Too much emotion means guilt. There is no safe amount. On March 15th, 1591, Isabel is marched into a public plaza. 4,000 people watch. She wears a yellow garment painted with flames. Her crimes are read aloud. The final charge is not heresy. It is failure of the body to display signs of divine grace. She is tied to a wooden stake. Wood is stacked beneath her feet. She is offered mercy. If she confesses properly one last time, she will be strangled before burning. She confesses again. A notary watches. Notes her dry eyes. Notes steady breathing. The fire is lit. Isabel burns conscious. By law, her 9-year-old daughter Anna is forced to watch. 20 years later, Anna stands before a tribunal of her own. She survives. She later explains how. She says she learned that truth cannot save. She learned that words mean nothing if the body speaks differently. She learned to train her body to lie. She practiced fainting, practiced shaking, practiced crying on command. She became what the system required, a woman whose survival depends on performance. Private Inquisition documents from the early 17th century admit there is no correlation between bodily measurements and belief. The method does not detect heresy, yet it expands. Because its real value is not detection, its value is psychological domination. When people believe their bodies can betray them, they begin policing themselves. They become prisoners inside their own nervous systems. The method does not die with the Inquisition. It reappears in Salem witch trials, in racial measurement programs, in early polygraph machines, always the same promise. The body will tell the truth. and always the same reality. These systems do not discover truth. They manufacture obedience. Isabel did not die because of candles. She did not die because of prayers. She did not die because of belief. She died because an institution decided innocence must be impossible. Because when innocence cannot be proven, obedience becomes the only way to survive. They did not only burn bodies, they destroyed the possibility of honest existence. And every time a society decides your biology is evidence, Isabel's story begins again.